nice to see so many people here. Long before I began going to church, the weeks from early January to late February were among my favorite times of the year. They were a season of light and inspiration even before I learned what Epiphany was or what it meant. Likewise, Lent was a dark season even when I knew nothing about the liturgical calendar. March, especially, has been grueling for decades now, remarkably consistent in whapping me upside the head with unpleasant realities. My March anniversaries include lost friendships, the deaths of loved ones, and entirely too many occasions when I have been told, to my horror, exactly what people thought of me. Sometimes I think that I found the church, or the church found me, in part because the liturgical year so neatly matches the rhythms of my own life. Today is the last Sunday of Epiphany. True to form, the weeks since January 6th have been a largely happy time for me. I've gotten small pieces of good news, I've done satisfying work, I've had good interactions with people. But as always, I'm dreading Lent, those 40 days of feeling like I'm crawling through a hostile desert. All of this means that my sympathies are firmly with Peter in this morning's gospel. Lord, it is good for us to be here. Let's stay here. Let's camp out on top of this mountain. We'll build houses. We'll hang with our buddies. We'll stay in the high, clear air, in the sunshine, where we can see for miles and everything makes sense. We just had this remarkable experience, the Transfiguration. Who wouldn't want to stay here? Why in the world would we leave? What do you mean we have to go back down the mountain? Why? Today's gospel is the beginning of the 17th chapter of Matthew. At the end of the 16th chapter, Jesus told his disciples that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. Peter didn't like this one bit. Never, Lord, this shall never happen to you. Jesus rebuked him, "Get thee behind me, Satan," and told his followers, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Cut to today's gospel, the Transfiguration. Peter, no doubt believing and hoping that all that death and cross stuff was just a bad dream, offers to build a holy subdivision and is rebuked again. This is my son with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. Listen, we have to descend the mountain. It's time to head to the desert. 3 days from now, on Ash Wednesday, we'll be reminded that we're dust, and to dust we shall return. I don't know about you, but I've been knowing that. Especially after the last 3 years, I don't need to be reminded that I'm going to die. I'm also not very keen on a day that directs me to bewail my manifold sins and wickedness, since I'm entirely too good at doing that all on my own. My work schedule will probably prevent me from attending Ash Wednesday services this year, and I can't pretend to be heartbroken. I'd much rather skip that particular liturgy. And I'd also rather not pick up a cross, thanks. My back's bad enough as it is. But we can't stop time. The seasons change whether we want them to or not. The wheel of the liturgical year brings us inexorably through Epiphany, back to Lent, and beyond Lent to Holy Week, Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday. Judas's betrayal, Peter's arrest, the horror of the crucifixion. The Son of God must be killed, and on the third day return to life. After descending the mountain, after descending into the tomb, Jesus will indeed rise again, and so will we. We know Easter's coming. It always does. But in the middle of Lent, as we crawl through that darkness, sometimes we forget to trust the return of the light. Please, just stay on the mountain. Wanting to live permanently on the heights, skipping the dust and pain and hard stuff is such a common human impulse that there's a fancy name for it: spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing is spirituality as avoidance, the use of prayer and church and meditation, not to resolve pain or difficulty, but to sidestep them, to shield us from the work we have to do. People engaged in spiritual bypassing try to use God to transcend being human. One form this takes is the impulse to skip over inconvenient bits of the liturgical year. You know, like not going to Ash Wednesday services, or going straight from Palm Sunday to Easter, skipping Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday. Those services hurt, but we can't fully appreciate Easter without them. Let me give you some other examples. In my work as a hospital chaplain, I've met a lot of patients, often hooked up to intimidating collections of tubes and monitors, sometimes reeling from difficult diagnoses, who tell me, "God won't give me more than I can handle." Some of them seem to think that's what the chaplain wants to hear, as if I'm going to mark them down for lack of faith if they admit to being scared or in pain. Sometimes they say it heartily, full of apparent confidence, but often their voices quaver, like those of school children trying to recite a poem they haven't quite memorized yet. In response, I always share my favorite bumper sticker. "I know God won't give me more than I can handle, but I wish He didn't trust me so much." Usually the patients laugh, and then we can have a genuine conversation. As a chaplain, I don't want you to be pious. I want you to be real. I want you to know that no God worth the name would think less of you for hurting and being scared. In my own life, I've found God when I acknowledged my turmoil, not when I tried to deny it. Even Jesus, in the garden, prayed for the cup to pass from him, if possible. Another form of spiritual bypassing pushes away other people's feelings so they won't make us uncomfortable. Some people maintain that real Christians should never be sad, worried, or depressed. They claim that real Christians should never feel doubt. But even Jesus on the cross cried, my God, why have you forsaken me?" We are called to heal and comfort the afflicted, both ourselves and others, not to judge and scold them. And yet Peter, poor bumbling Peter, who always seems to put his foot in his mouth, does keep getting scolded. "Get thee behind me, Satan. This is my son. Listen to him." As much as Peter sometimes exasperates me, today I feel protective of him. I think we need to honor what he's doing right. First, he recognizes his own feelings. He wants to stay on that mountain. Amen, Peter. So do I. And importantly, he knows he's having a peak experience. That may sound obvious. It would be difficult for someone blinded by the dazzling light of God to deny that something wonderful had just happened. But often the quieter glories get lost in the hurry of everyday life. How many of us look back on our lives and think, that summer was perfect, and I didn't appreciate it. I took Mom and Dad for granted when they were still alive. Why didn't I treasure my non-aching joints and good eyesight while I still had them? Part of what Peter teaches us then is to live in the moment. March may be hard. The desert may be dreadful. Crosses are heavy, and carrying them is uncomfortable at best. But today, right now, we have friends and fresh air and good things to eat, and the view is lovely. Those memories will help sustain us later on when the going gets harder. Like communion, they're food for the journey. I often tell Christian patients that we worship a God who doesn't promise to spare us pain and struggle, but who does promise to be with us through them. For him to be with us, though, we need to be with him. We need to go with God, to follow him down the mountain, through the desert and the valley of the shadow, until we reach Calvary and finally the empty tomb beyond it. Jesus doesn't bypass any of that. If we follow him, we can't either. On this last Sunday of Epiphany, may all of us experience dazzling, glorious transcendence. May we delight in the ease and comfort and perspective offered by the mountaintop. And then, girding our loins, may we vaya con Dios, going step by step with God through the 40 days of Lent into a future whose darkness and losses we fear, but whose ultimate consolation we know we can trust. Amen.